The autumn leaves danced in the wind like scattered fragments of Emily's world, moments before it would shatter completely. She had been walking through Riverside Park, seeking solace from another exhausting day at her marketing firm, when she saw him, her father, the man who had been her North Star for 25 years, cradling a woman in his arms while a little boy tugged at his coat sleeve. Time crystallized into a single, breathless moment. The woman was nothing like her mother, where Margaret Chen was elegant and reserved. This stranger was vibrant and carefree, her laughter echoing across the playground like wind chimes. The boy, perhaps 6 years old, had her father's unmistakable dimpled smile and the same habit of running his fingers through his hair when excited. Emily's knees buckled. She gripped the park bench beside her, feeling as though the earth had tilted off its axes. This was David Chen, the pillar of their family, the man who had built his accounting firm from nothing, who never missed her school plays, who taught her to ride a bicycle with infinite patience. This was the father who had kissed her mother goodbye that very morning with what Emily had always believed was unwavering devotion. Their family had been the portrait of American middle-class success. Their Tudor home in Westchester County stood as a testament to her father's tireless work ethic, while her mother tended to every detail with grace, from the perfectly maintained garden to the family dinners that brought them together each evening. Emily remembered countless summer vacations to Cape Cod, Christmas mornings filled with laughter, and her father's proud smile at her college graduation. Yet, beneath this veneer of perfection, she now recognized the signs she had missed. Her father's increasingly late nights at the office, the way his eyes sometimes seemed distant during family conversations, the phone calls he would take in his study behind closed doors. As she watched her father lift the little boy onto his shoulders, the same gesture he had performed countless times with her, Emily felt something crack inside her chest. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the playground, and she realized that her family's shadows held secrets she had never imagined. The following weeks became a labyrinth of discovery and deception. Emily found herself transformed into someone she didn't recognize, a detective in her own life, following her father through the streets of Queens to a modest neighborhood where dreams seemed smaller, but perhaps more authentic. The first revelation came on a Thursday evening when she watched her father enter a weathered apartment building on 47th Avenue. Through careful observation, she learned about Maria Santos, a woman 10 years younger than her mother who worked double shifts at a local diner while raising her son Carlos. Their world was painted in vibrant colors. Salsa music spilled from open windows, children played in the streets until dark, and neighbors shared meals on fire escapes. It was a universe away from the manicured lawns and hushed conversations of Emily's childhood. When Emily finally confronted her father in his study one evening, the weight of his confession nearly crushed her. David's hands trembled as he poured himself a scotch, a ritual she had witnessed throughout her life, but now it seemed like armor against vulnerability. "It began 7 years ago," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was working late on a project in Queens when my car broke down. Maria was walking home from her shift and helped me. She didn't know who I was or what I had. She just saw someone who needed help." His eyes glistened with tears Emily had never seen before. "I was so tired, Emily, tired of being perfect, tired of carrying everyone's expectations. With Maria, I could just be." Emily's anger blazed like wildfire. So you decided to build another family? What about us? What about Mom? He never meant for it to happen, David continued, his voice cracking. But Carlos, when Maria told me she was pregnant, I couldn't abandon them. I've been supporting them, yes, but Emily, you have to understand, I never stopped loving you and your mother. I got lost somewhere along the way. The second shock came when Emily met Maria and Carlos at a neighborhood festival, approaching them with a mixture of trepidation and curiosity. Maria's warmth was immediate and genuine, and Carlos, with his gap-toothed grin and endless energy, reminded Emily so much of herself at that age that her heart ached. They lived simply, gratefully, with a joy that seemed to have slowly leaked out of her own family over the years. "Your father," Maria said softly after Carlos had run off to play, "he saved us, not just with money, with hope. He never promised me more than he could give, but he gave us everything he could." Her honesty was like a mirror reflecting the contradictions Emily couldn't yet understand. The final domino fell on a rain-soaked evening in November. Emily arrived home to find her mother sitting at the kitchen table, David's credit card statements spread before her like evidence in a court case. Margaret's usual composure had cracked, revealing a woman Emily barely recognized, raw, betrayed, and seething with the accumulated disappointments of a lifetime. "How long have you known?" her mother asked without looking up, her voice as sharp as broken glass. The confrontation that followed was a hurricane of accusations, tears, and 25 years of unspoken grievances. David left that night with a single suitcase, and Emily found herself marooned between two worlds, her mother's righteous fury and her growing understanding of her father's impossible choices. The winter that followed was the darkest of Emily's life. Her mother's friends whispered behind manicured hands at the country club. Her colleagues treated her with the careful sympathy reserved for scandal. And her father seemed to disappear into his other life, leaving Emily feeling like an orphan in her own story. But as the snow began to melt in March, Emily made a decision that surprised even herself. She would not let her family's story end in bitterness and division. She began by reaching out to Maria again, this time as someone seeking understanding rather than answers. Over coffee in Maria's small kitchen, while Carlos practiced piano on an old upright that had seen better days, Emily learned about her father's other life in all its complexity. He coached Carlos's Little League team, helped Maria study for her GED, and had quietly paid for her grandmother's medical treatments. This wasn't the callous abandonment Emily had imagined. It was love, messy and complicated and perhaps misguided, but love nonetheless. "He talks about you all the time," Maria said, refilling Emily's cup, "about how proud he is, how much he misses the talks he used to have. He's carried his guilt like stones in his pockets, Emily. It's been destroying him." The breakthrough came when Emily realized that her father hadn't chosen one family over another. He had been trying, impossibly, to be enough for both. His silence hadn't been born of indifference, but of a crushing sense of responsibility and shame. Armed with this understanding, Emily orchestrated what might have been the most difficult conversation of her life. She convinced her parents to meet at a neutral location, a small cafe downtown where her father used to take her for hot chocolate when she was young. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. Margaret arrived with armor made of dignity and hurt, while David looked like a man walking to his execution. Emily sat between them, literally and figuratively, as she shared what she had learned about their family's other half. "Mom," Emily said, taking her mother's cold hands, "I'm not asking you to forgive him, but I am asking you to understand that this wasn't about not loving us enough. It was about him trying to love too much and not knowing how to do it right." The conversation that followed was painful, necessary, and ultimately transformative. Margaret's anger didn't dissolve, it evolved into something more complex, tinged with recognition of her own role in the distance that had grown between them. David's shame began to transform into a commitment to honesty, no matter how difficult. The resolution didn't come in a single moment, but gradually, like a photograph developing in a dark room. David moved into a small apartment, equidistant from both families, creating a new kind of balance. Margaret began therapy and eventually asked to meet Maria, not as rivals, but as two women who had loved the same complicated man in different ways. The most surprising development came 6 months later, when Emily found herself helping Carlos with his homework, while her parents and Maria discussed the practicalities of their unconventional arrangement. Two families had become something new, not traditional, but honest, not perfect, but real. As Emily watched her father teach Carlos the same card game he had taught her decades ago, she realized that love wasn't always clean or conventional. Sometimes it was messy and complicated and required more courage than following the rules. Sometimes healing meant expanding your definition of family, rather than protecting its boundaries. The autumn leaves were falling again as Emily stood in Riverside Park, but this time she wasn't alone. Carlos was collecting the prettiest ones in a paper bag, while her father pointed out different types of trees. Her mother and Maria sat on a nearby bench, sharing stories about their children with the careful friendship of two women who had loved the same complicated man in different ways. Emily smiled, thinking about the Christmas plans they were making. Unconventional, certainly, but filled with a love that had learned to be honest about its imperfections. She had discovered that the strongest foundations weren't built from secrets and silence, but from the courage to face the truth and choose love anyway, in all its beautiful, complicated forms. In the end, she realized families aren't just born. Sometimes they're built, one difficult conversation at a time, by people brave enough to choose forgiveness over fury and understanding over judgment. The father's secret had nearly destroyed them, but it had also taught them that love, when finally freed from the prison of perfection, could become something far more powerful than they had ever imagined.